Have a seat on your porcelain throne. It's time to talk some shit on the Powell movement.
Welcome to the Powell movement. I'm your host, Mike Powell, and this week we've reached a huge milestone, episode 300. And now, you guessed it, it's time for me to reflect on my podcast journey, the state of podcasting, and my place in it, or whatever comes out of my mouth in this stream of consciousness. First and foremost, when I started this podcast, I was sort of unhappy with my work life. I had been with K2 Sports for like 16 years, and I was managing athletes and marketing, and it was an incredible ride. I worked with my best friends, I traveled the world, and I was stoked about every single thing but my pay. I was making like 65 grand after 16 years, and that just didn't seem fair to me. And when that happens in a job where you go into your review every year and you don't get what you feel like you're worth, or even a cost of living increase, it makes you bitter. And I didn't want to be bitter. I love the K2 brand, but the company felt like it was changing, and I wasn't making the money I thought I was worth. And I decided it was time to take another job. My new gig, selling partnerships for the Brooklyn Brewery in Oakley, sounded really cool on paper. But the owner of the company was such a mean, terrible person that I eventually realized that if I wanted to keep my sanity, I needed to quit that job. And now you may think, how miserable could this person be? Mike's just overreacting. But I'm not. And to prove it, I decided the best way to explain how bad this person sucked would be to read one of the many Glassdoor reviews of the company. So with these reviews, they start with the pros. And the pros on this review read like this. The only positive from working here is your horror stories that you'll tell friends and family that will leave them doubled over in laughter. And then the cons. Run by a person who is, to put it as gently as possible, unfit to work with others. You'll get yelled at in front of colleagues about things that don't involve you, then quietly apologize to later. Loud arguments, weird phone calls, insinuations that your emails are being read, changing priorities, threats to sue anyone and everyone, extremely and almost unbelievably negative words about former employees, sometimes all in one day. Then the next day, all is back to normal and you'll think, did that just happen? Did I dream it? You did not. Wait a day and it happens again. An unending stream of angry missives, passive-aggressive comments, paranoia, scared, checked-out colleagues, and just general bad vibes. In conclusion, I'd steer clear. So, based on that review, I had to get out of there. And while I was doing well at the job, this is also the time that I decided to start planning this podcast, while on the clock. So even at the pre-production phase of this podcast project, I was getting paid. So with the planning of the podcast, I had started reaching out to people, and before I knew it, I had an all-time guest list lined up, and I hadn't recorded anything yet. I was psyched, and I started pitching the idea of a podcast to Powder Magazine, and I wanted them to promote it with me, but they said, no, we don't want you to do your own The Powell Movement podcast. We want you to create the sponsored podcast with us. And when I say they said we want you to create the sponsored podcast, I named it, so they didn't come up with that at all. But it was another hell yeah moment because Powder decided they wanted to pay me a meager salary. And for me, a guy who's going to quit his job and just go into this podcast world that I know nothing about, getting a paycheck with the launch of the podcast sounded like a dream gig. So I decided to sign on with Powder Magazine as well. Maybe not the best idea in terms of building the Powell Movement podcast, but that's what I did. So I haven't recorded a word yet. I've got paychecks lined up and it's time to quit my job. So I did what any disgruntled employee who works for an asshole does. I took my 3 weeks of vacation back to back to back, and I let the boss know multiple times that this was my plan. While I'm 2 weeks into my trip, my boss started losing her mind on me, freaking out that I'm gone so long. But I had the emails to back up that she knew this was going on the whole time. But it didn't matter. She was livid and losing her mind on me while I'm with my family at Disney World. So when my vacation was over, I was really dreading going back to work and facing the music. While I was in Seattle working at WeWork, the headquarters of this company were in Minneapolis. And I had an all-hands meeting in Minneapolis coming up upon my return. And while my boss really did like me, I was like the favorite employee of the company while I was there, especially compared to the rest of the employees, I know that she was about to turn on me. But lucky for me, I got back from this long vacation, head into WeWork, and maybe on day 1 or 2 back, my boss started belittling a coworker of mine. And I could see these daily beatdowns wearing at my coworker's self-esteem day in and day out, and it was starting to affect me. I mean, she would vent to me about how bad of an employee this guy was, and she was so wrong. Yeah, he may not have been closing deals left and right, but he outworked everyone. So she calls me one day after yelling at him, and I'm in one of those WeWork phone booths, and I stop her in her tracks as she's talking shit on him, and I say, I can't do this anymore. I'm finally giving you my 2-week notice. I quit. Now, I had planned on quitting. My wife and I discussed it, but that wasn't supposed to happen that day. But it did. And after it happened, I was hoping that she wouldn't want me to stay for the 2 weeks because that's the type of person she was. I figured she'd just cut ties right there and then. But, to my dismay and surprise, she begged me to stay on for 4 weeks longer so I could oversee the Olympic deals that I put together. So I did stay, but I refused to go back to Brazil with her for the event. I mean, Zika virus was spreading at this point, and while small heads can be cute, I didn't want one. And that's not even a funny joke. So I quit that job in August, and I started my first podcast with Powder Magazine that September. And then in January, I launched the Powell Movement. And talk about stressful. I had given up everything I know to start a whole new profession that I had zero experience in. And my thought process was, while I hate to say that I'm funny, I sure think I can be at times. And I'm also quick-witted and a tiptoer of the line. And when I was tiptoeing the line, people did that without fear of getting canceled. But all of that's kind of changed these days. So based on that, I thought I was going to be the funny guy who has great conversations with friends and peers. But over the years, I've learned that the podcast isn't about me. Most people don't care to hear me be funny. They don't tune in for that type of content. They tune in because I do more research and ask better questions than just about anyone. Sure, I sound cocky when I say that, but I'll put my interviews up against all the others out there. And if you listen to me interview someone versus someone else interviewing the same person, you'll see what I mean. I will say that some of the other podcasts, they do feel more like a conversation than mine. And while I did want the podcast to feel like two old friends having a conversation, it turned into more of an interview. And this is calculated. I want to tell as much of a backstory as I can. And if I do that with regular conversation topics, they turn into tangents. And I'm way too ADD to talk to anyone for 3+ hours. Actually, longer is fine with me in person, but the ADD really kicks in when I have a remote interview. So by being specific about what I want to know, it helps me and my guests tell the whole story. And I feel like I have it down to a science, but I had no clue what I was doing when I started. And back then, this whole country was changing. Trump had just taken office, and all of a sudden it seemed like racists, sexists, and homophobes showed their faces after 8 years of hiding their terrible behavior. It was gross, and it made me embarrassed to be an American, and that hasn't changed. It's gotten a little better with our new regime, but to be honest, Biden sucks too. And while I love the America I grew up with, and I've said it time and again on the podcast, I don't even think we're close to the greatest nation in the world anymore. We suck, and it's sad, but it is what it is. We did this to ourselves. And with all the terrible shit that was going on in the country, if that wasn't enough, then the pandemic hit. And that was a tough one for the podcast. I lost some sponsors right away, and I didn't know what I was going to do. I mean, I wasn't going to go get a new job in the middle of the pandemic. And the brands that broke their contracts, well, I get it. They were all worried about themselves. So I was screwed for a couple of months, but things came back, and I got some new sponsors. The world was still crazy, as we all remember, with the pandemic, and my saving grace was skiing. The industry seemed to be doing okay, and my boy and I lived up at the summit at Snoqualmie, and it was magical. They handled the crowds and the situation better than anyone else in Washington State, and it was fantastic. Another thing that was happening to me was that, like a lot of people, I started drinking a lot more once we were locked down. I got all the way to 190 pounds on my almost 5'9" frame, and I was looking way too big, and I was embarrassed. But I was lucky, even though I didn't know it. See, a month before the pandemic, my wife came home and was like, "Oh, I forgot to mention I bought a Peloton today." I was like, "What the fuck? Don't you think we should talk about expensive purchases like that?" But it didn't matter. We got the bike when other people couldn't during the lockdown, and I decided I was going to use it. Before I jumped on the bike, the first thing I did was I called former pro skier Josh Lubeck to see if he would send me some of the vitamins from the brand that he had just started, Nema. And then I started taking the Nema and riding the bike for almost 2 hours a day. And a year later, I was down 40 pounds and I even saw my abs. Now, I was the most unhealthy person you know. And if I can make that change and get healthy, you can too. And I'm not going to push you into it, but if you want to make a change, I recommend starting with Nema. And when you go to Nema.com and use the code POWELL15, that's capital P, lowercase OWELL, the number 15, all one word at checkout, you are going to get 15% off. And know that with all these codes I give out, I'm not making money off any of them. I ask for codes from people to extend a discount on great product for you, nothing more. So know that I'm not trying to profit off any of this stuff. I just want you guys to have the best stuff. And as I'm walking you through a lot of what has happened over the past 6 years since I started the podcast, and while life has been good personally, The state of the nation, it's still shitty. The leadership still sucks. Women are having their rights taken away. Climate change is catching up with us. And people are still assholes. And I can go on. And I will say that with all of the shit that we've gone through and will go through, at least we have the mountains to escape to. And yeah, we don't have Powder or any mass ski or snowboard magazines anymore. But we do have the Mountain Gazette, the Ski Journal, Free Skier, the Snowboard Journal, Slush, Bomb Snow, and Ski Magazine Online. I think people even go to New Schoolers still. But what I know for sure is that for all of the negative shit going on in the world, there's less negative shit going on in the mountains. And sure, I complain about them being overpriced and crowded and the experience always isn't that great, but it's a hell of a lot better of an experience compared to the lives of non-mountain going people, in my opinion. So that's my summary of the past few years, and throughout all of this time, I've delivered an interesting and informative podcast every week. But none of my guests have had close to an impact on the world as my guest this week. Gus Kenworthy is an Olympic medalist, an X Games medalist. He's won Dew Tours, Crystal Globes. He's skied on the highest level in halfpipe, slopestyle, and big air. He's filmed with Poor Boys and Matchstick. He's the last skier to do everything like the first and second generations of the new school. But Gus is different than his peers, and his difference shouldn't really matter. But in this shitty world, it sure does. So on the podcast, Gus and I are going to talk about all the things. And while Gus was worried about this interview, and if you know me, I'm sure you'll understand his worries, but I realized how important Gus and this podcast are, and I think I crushed this one. And to be completely honest, I think I crushed every single one of these, because I'm a fucking pro. But before we get into episode 300, I want to let you know that I convinced Outdoor Research to extend my 25% off deal through the week of the 300th episode. I mean, it's like 75 degrees here in Seattle, and not too many people are buying winter gear, so we're extending it 1 week. And if you want 25% off the best gear on the planet, head on over to outdoorresearch.com, go shopping. Also listen to the ad in this podcast because there is some fine print that you're going to need to listen to. But at checkout, enter the code capital POWELL 25 with no spaces. So that's all capital letters, the number 25. You're going to get a 25% discount off all OR gear that falls into the parameters, which I put into the ad in this podcast. It's amazing stuff, and I hope you check it out and use the code. Like I said, I'm not trying to make money off it. I'm trying to keep you warm and dry all winter long. So that's the great deal from Outdoor Research. I also want to thank each and every one of you for listening. Without you guys, I wouldn't have sponsors and there wouldn't be a podcast. So thank you very much. I also need to thank the other incredible brands who make this show happen. They are Stanley, Peter Glenn Ski and Sports, Elon Skis, and the 10 Barrel Brewery. Now it's time for episode 300 with Gus Kenworthy. This time of year has to be wild for you. Normally, I would think you'd be coming home from New Zealand or South America and getting ready for a big US ski season. But for the first time in forever, you don't have to think about skiing. Is that strange? Is that awesome? Is it sad? What are the feels for you?
Yeah, I mean, it's both of those things. It's awesome. It's sad. I don't know. I mean, there's like a little bit of FOMO, seeing stories and seeing people going there, and even if I'm like not excited about competing or anything anymore, like it's still just fun to travel and be in New Zealand or be across the planet with friends skiing. And so like I miss that, of course, but ultimately I kind of knew that it wasn't going to last forever, and I wanted to end my career the way that I wanted to end it, which is more or less how I did it. And so it's kind of just like closing that door and understanding that it is tough, but it's all good. I don't know. I wouldn't want to continue chasing it the way that I was. So I'm happy to be sitting on the sidelines and watching now and just get to have skiing be a fun thing that I do with friends and family and not something that is stressful and, I don't know, makes me worry, makes me have to deal with injury and everything. It gets to just be a fun thing now.
Yeah, I can see that being a nice change of pace. And with your ski career kind of ended, I mean, you're still going to ski and everything, but you've made so many friends throughout the ski industry over the years. And now that you're out of the ski space, it seems like, and it looks like, I won't say there's a hard line, but it's like you're doing your own thing. The skiers are doing their things in the different continents that they're on right now. Who are the skiers that you're going to keep in touch with after your career is over?
Oh, interesting. I mean, it's funny because a lot of them are actually not guys that are even still really doing it. I feel like I was one of the last people that was really still hanging on from my generation. And Bobby Brown and Josh Christensen and Jossie Wells and Russ Henshaw and like the guys that I was the closest with all stopped competing before I did. And so it was sort of like a next generation that was coming up that I was kind of like the oldest person hanging on for dear life. And it was all these like young dudes. But yeah, I mean, those guys I just said are people that I have continued to stay in contact with. I mean, Bobby's one of my best friends in the whole world. Think of him like a brother. We're very close still. And Joss and Jossie and all those guys, it's like there's nothing but love. We live in different places, so a lot of us don't talk that often, but would do anything for any of them, and I'm sure that they would say the same.
Cool. Well, before we should really talk about skiing, we should talk about your life. It starts in the UK. It's your mom, your dad, your two brothers. But you moved to Telluride when you're 2 years old. I'm going to guess that your parents wanted to get you guys in the mountain and kind of raise you in a different area, is my guess. And I would think that when you moved to Telluride, things were a whole lot different than they are now. Like it was a real deal Western mountain town that was a mix of cowboys, hippies, and ski bums, I would think.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, actually, it was not my parents wanting to like raise us in the mountains or like with any sort of dreams or aspirations for us or for me to be a professional skier or like anything like that. It's not the like football dad that pushes it on their son. My mom had never even skied before when we moved there. She learned when she was 40 and I was 3.
Okay.
Kind of learned together. It was actually really random that we ended up there. My dad was living in London banking. He's from Philadelphia. And so he went back to Philly to see family. And then while he was in the States, he decided to go visit his 2 college roommates. And just by chance, one of them lives in Crested Butte and one of them lives in Aspen. So he went out to visit both of them, was like, oh, I heard Telluride's cool. I'm going to check it out. And he just like went and was like, wow, this place is insane. I can't imagine a better place. And kind of was like, I don't even know what it means for anything, but I want to be here. And so he like uprooted the whole family and just kind of moved us there. He was banking in London. He was able to get a job at a bank in Telluride and just took it.
So the whole family gets into skiing. I don't know if your dad had already skied or not, but you have 2 older brothers. And when you're the little guy, do they push you to do shit without you even thinking of consequences? Like, does older brother peer pressure make you prone to take more risks?
For sure. Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think that like I'm the youngest, and also like when you're the youngest, especially just when you're young in general, you're kind of like made out of rubber.
Right.
But all I wanted to do was like impress my brothers, do right by my brothers. And then I had a really good group of friends as I got a little older that were all into the ski scene, and sort of that was the basis of our friendship. But they were all older than I was too. So I was always kind of like the youngest. And I feel like that pushed me because I was trying to keep up with the bigger dudes, the stronger dudes, the older dudes. And also just like, I don't know, I feel like I had sort of big shoes to fill type of thing. So it kind of like instilled a work ethic in me to try and be on their level, even though I was a couple years younger, or in my brother's cases, a lot younger. And yeah.
Okay. And with this next question and a lot of my questions, please don't think that you're going to come off as cocky or arrogant with your answers, because some of my questions are going to lead you in that direction. But that's because me and all my listeners already know that you're a supremely talented human. So when I think about you playing team sports, because I know you played hockey, you were a soccer goalie, was it one of those things where you're always one of the best on your teams in whatever sport you're doing?
No. I mean, I think I'm like generally pretty athletic. And I think I was like good at those sports, but it wasn't like, oh my God, I guess is like a super athlete. And I don't think that that was the case with skiing either. I mean, if you look at like old videos, and there's not much when I was really young, but like I was busted. I had the worst little kid style. I was not the best out of my friend group. I wasn't like the guy that all of my friends were like, oh my God, Gus is going to make it. Like there was actually other friends of mine that like we all thought was going to go pro, like my friend Woody and my friend Hoot. And I feel like it kind of changed for me at a certain point, and I feel like I started working harder and approaching it differently, and it just started to click more. But when I was younger, it was not like the fact that I was like this natural talent. I feel like if anything, for a long time, it was like I was kind of the hard worker. I was first chair, last call, and got better slowly versus just having it innately.
And your skiing, are you put into a program? Because I mean, most kids go into like a race program first. I don't think that was the case with you, but I don't know. I think it was moguls first and foremost, but how did skiing start with you?
Yeah, it definitely wasn't like a program. And even as I got further along, like I never went to like a ski academy or anything like that. I just like skied with my family and then signed up for the local club. And there wasn't like, you couldn't do slopestyle. It wasn't like you could like be a part of the slopestyle team. Like that didn't even really exist yet. Our mountain was like just starting to kind of scrounge together the first terrain park that they had, which was like dinky little rails and like a couple like poorly built jumps. Never had a half pipe. It wasn't anything like that. But I did moguls because that was like where there was a program, and I knew I didn't want to race. I didn't want to get up early as hell and didn't want to wear spandex, and just was like, I think I'll do moguls because they get to like do tricks.
Was this all during the fate pants and knee patches on anything?
Oh, bro, yeah, of course. I definitely had fate pants and knee patches. I had like double hand-me-downs. Because I had two older brothers, like by the time anything got to me, it was so worn in. But yeah, I had fate snow pants that were both of my brothers before mine.
Okay. And was Johnny Mosley a hero for you at that point? Like him making the Olympics and winning the gold medal? Did that make it seem like the Olympics were something that was attainable for a mogul skier at that point?
I mean, I guess. I do specifically remember watching that. But it was like, at that point, I wasn't like, I want to be a pro skier. I'm going to be a professional mogul skier. I'm going to go to the Olympics. Like, I thought it was cool, and I thought Johnny Mosley was cool. Like, the 360 mute was obviously very cool, the dinner roll. And I kind of, like, remembered wanting to, like, do those tricks, too. But it wasn't really until, like, a little later that I was like, oh, no, I want to be a skier. And it was because of, like, ski movies. It was, like, Session 1242 and, like, X equals 10 and High Five and, like, these videos that I used to love so much. Like, that's when it really got instilled in me that, like, that's what I want to do and that's what I could do. And that's kind of, like, a dream. But when I was really young, I mean, I wanted to be an actor. I wanted to be a hockey player. When I would ski, I would say I wanted to be a skier. I would doodle and say I wanted to be a cartoonist. Like, I didn't fucking know. I just wanted to be whatever.
Were you a competitive kid? Because it sounds like if you want to be an actor, if you want to be this, it's like you want to be the best in all these different worlds. Was it a competitive thing for you, or is it just what you wanted to be?
It's both. I am really competitive. It's actually been kind of like a lifelong goal to work through and unpack. Not that there's anything wrong with being competitive, obviously, especially if you're doing something competitive for your livelihood and as your sort of like life path. It's obviously super important, but it's also like, I don't know, it's not like necessarily always the healthiest quality to have. And like, there's something to be said for being competitive and wanting something and being driven, but there's also something to be said for like being able to accept a loss, being able to like be forgiving on yourself, not taking something so seriously, not letting a stupid game get blown out of proportions because you're like so aggro about the rules.
Right.
And so I feel like as a kid, I was really competitive, but I was kind of like a little shit. Like I was like a poor sport and I was a pain in the ass to deal with when we would play like board games or stuff with the family. And I feel like I just had to learn how to, I guess, kind of like work through that.
How are you these days? You play ping pong with someone and you're probably better than them. Are you going to make it an interesting game or are you just going to kick the shit out of them?
I have no idea how to answer that. I don't know if I would be better than them at ping pong. As I said, I'm not like the best at everything. Like, I don't know if that is what you think, but it's not the case.
I think you're probably a talented human who's put in a shit ton of work to make all your talents come out and be better than everybody. But I think you do have some God-born gifts and talents that you have that maybe other people don't, that you put work in to develop.
Oh, well, okay. Then in that case, I think that's probably a pretty reasonable assessment.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, it really depends. I think I can sort of see the when and where and why of it all. And so, like, there are times that I sort of understand that this is a time that it's, like, okay to be insane and get competitive. But then I also am able to recognize when it's not. So it's like a mixture of both.
And then in thinking that moguls are just a small part of your ski career, but when I think of the full body of your work, well, you've gotten bodied a shit ton. I mean, you think about overshooting and undershooting jumps. You've decked, you've pushed out to the flat bottom of the pipe. And with those crashes, you can usually pinpoint a mistake. But in the moguls, have you had that one crash where you're just flat out going way too fast, lost control, and then just started skipping over bumps and it's just like you're at the mercy of the mountain and gravity?
I mean, yes and no. Not like one that stands out where it was like horrific, but I definitely know that feeling of being in the moguls and getting going faster than I want to or faster than I feel like I have control over, and it's scary. But also moguls, it was such a small portion of my life or ski career. It was something I did for a couple seasons when I was pretty young. And then as soon as Telluride started having a proper terrain park, and as soon as there was like a coach that was in the program that was willing to take kids into the park that wanted to go there, I was like, peace, I don't want to ever go back in the moguls again.
Right on. You had mentioned Hoot Brown before, but it sounds like he was the hero of your mountain, given he's like a year or two older than you. But is he the guy that you're chasing around the mountain and best friends with, and he's like the skier that you want to be and your best friend all in one?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, Hoot was someone that I became really fast friends with. He wasn't someone that I was friends with from a really, really young age, but like for the last 2 years of his life, he passed when he was 16 and I was 14. But for those last 2 years, we were like pretty inseparable. I looked up to him a lot, just as a person and also as a skier. And he definitely like sparked my love of skiing more than other people have. Or maybe it was already sparked, but he like stoked that love. And yeah, I don't know. We just had a really, really a beautiful friendship. He was definitely one of the best of our friend group. I also think that there's a phenomenon when people die young where they sort of get immortalized or lionized and everyone just remembers the best of them. And with Hoot, it's really easy because it's all good things. I mean, I can't think of a bad thing about him, but I don't know. I don't know if he was like the guy that everyone at the mountain was chasing. He just like, he had an incredible spirit and kindness, and he was really funny, and he also was really talented, but we all just were so young. But he definitely was one of the standouts in our group. And my friend Colby, my friend Woody were also both kids that I grew up skiing with, same group. They were also both on track to be something in the sport, certainly more so than I was at that time.
Okay. So you have this friend group, you've got hockey and soccer, I think, as well. But something that I have to bring up, and it's a big part of your life, I'm going to bring it up, you probably expect it, is that while everyone has awkward teenage years, your story's a little bit different than everybody else's experience. And I would think by the time you're 8 or 9-ish, you know that you're different than most boys, but you might not be able to pinpoint the difference. You just know something's different. But are you aware and almost scared, like, I know I'm different at this point in life and I can't let anybody find out?
Yes, for sure. I definitely did know. And I knew even younger than that, but again, just as you said, like I didn't have words to articulate it. I wasn't contextualizing it. I wasn't like, oh, I'm homosexual because I'm attracted to men, and this is what that means, and this is how society perceives me, and this is what I have to deal with or what I'm going to have to go through, and this is why my life's harder, but this is also why my life will be better. Like it wasn't anything like that. I just was like, oh shit, something's different about me, and I couldn't really pinpoint it. I felt a draw to boys, to guys, but like I didn't know what it was. I didn't know if I wanted to just be like them, if I wanted to be best friends with them, if I wanted to be with them romantically, like if I wanted to turn out to be like that. I just didn't know. But I did know that there was something that was different because I was able to just pick up on that. And I was kind of, I don't know, yeah, from a really early age, acutely aware of something. And it wasn't until I was a bit older that I was like, oh yeah, no, I'm gay.
Is that by the time you're like 13 or 14? Does that click, or even before that?
No, it definitely clicked because I remember like Hoot passed away when I was 14, and I actually like had the thought that for a long, long time I carried it with me that I wished it had been me because then nobody would have ever had to find out that secret that I was harboring. And if I had died when I was 14, then no one would have ever known I was gay, and I would have never had to disappoint anyone. And that's how I thought of it for a really long time. And I had to work on unpacking that. Oh my God, yeah. I'm getting emotional.
I'm getting emotional too, man. It's
but yeah, oh my God, sorry. But yeah, I just remember thinking that like if I had died instead of him, then like all these beautiful things everyone said at his memorial and all these beautiful things that are true about him like would have got to going on. Everyone would have gotten to continue enjoying them, and this thing that I had that I thought was this really horrible thing, no one would have ever had to know. So it would have been like a blessing kind of, but I've obviously grown to have a different opinion of that. And I feel very differently now. And it's funny because I spent so much of my life like hating that part of myself and like wishing it wasn't true and praying that it would be different when I would wake up the next day and praying that it was a phase and praying that it wasn't real. Now I'm like, oh my God, thank God I'm gay. I love my life. I love my boyfriend. I love my friends. I like love the things that I get to do that I feel like are unique to me as a gay man and as part of the LGBTQ community. And like, I wouldn't change anything ever, but it definitely was hard. Like those awkward teenage years were sort of more awkward than awkward. They were something a lot darker.
Well, we also live in a society that is terrible towards gay people as a whole. And you've lived this and heard this throughout all of your friends. I'm sure everybody's using the word gay as an adjective. So it's like you're hearing this. You're probably using it as well, trying to cover up shit. And it's like all of these emotions and thoughts in your head. I don't know. I just kind of got way ahead of myself and had to say that. But it's just so sad to hear that you had to live with that, thinking that you would have rather been in Hoot's position at that point. But Hoot's like one of your best friends at that point. He's a little bit older. He's a great skier. It sounds like you guys are inseparable. Do you ever think that you guys were tight enough that you would have ever been able to tell him had he lived longer?
Yeah, actually. I mean, I also used to like pepper my friends with hypotheticals. Like, I don't even know. Like, if I did something horrible, would you still be my friend? Like, stupid shit like that. But just to kind of like gauge who might eventually be someone that would be a confidant and someone that I could tell. And I actually remember thinking that Hoot was someone that I could tell. He was like so sensitive and caring, and like I didn't feel like he would run away if I told him. And that was something that I was really dealing with and considering at that like exact time, basically. And then he was killed. And so then I was like, oh my God. And I also think I like internalized some of that as like, oh, this is my fault because I was going to maybe tell him that. I don't know. It was a lot of shit to unpack. Thank God for therapy.
Now it's time for my first sponsor break, and I'm going to start out by giving you a 25% off code to the best outerwear on the planet. I'm talking about Seattle's Outdoor Research. OR has always been known as the outerwear brand that makes things of the absolute highest quality. From rain jackets for the city slickers to the stuff mountaineers can trust in the highest peaks in the world. OR has always delivered. But now, their fits and styles have changed. While they still make the best-in-class product for mountaineers, they also have everything for the resort skier or snowboarder or that kid that wants to hit the park. And they make a lot more than just that. So to get 25% off your Outdoor Research order, head on over to outdoorresearch.com and go shopping. When you check out, enter the code POWEL25, that's all caps, no spaces, and the number 25 when you check out, and you'll get that discount. I should also note that this code is valid for 25% off non-sale items only and not valid on OR Pro styles. Next up, it's the award-winning Elan ski brand. I've been telling you how amazing my ripsticks are and how the whole Elan collection will make you a better skier, but don't just take my word for it. In the Free Skier magazine test, Elan dominated in the most important categories. One of my favorite skis, the Ripstick 96, was the best-in-class #1 in the men's 96 to 99 category. So if you're looking for a ski that's a daily driver that will do everything, Free Skier magazine and their elite testers say that Elan is the best, period. The Ripsticks 106 placed in the top 5 for the 106 to 109 category. And for true powder skis, the Ripstick 116 took second place. So if you trust the ski tests, Elan is your choice. And if you trust me, Elan is your choice. And if you care about the planet, Elan should be your choice, as they have built their own solar plant that powers their factory, and since July, their factory is run on 100% renewable energy sources. Elan is arguably the most responsible supplier in all of snow, and they're always good times. To find out more about Elan and their factory, head on over to elanskis.com. And last but not least, it's time to talk about Stanley. And you know them as the brand that invented the category of keeping your drinks hot or cold. You know, Stanley's the brand with that iconic green bottle that kept your grandpa's coffee hot all day long. Well, Stanley still makes that bottle along with so many other products. Think food storage, coolers and jugs, camp cookware. They have something for everyone's adventure, and it's not overpriced like the competition. Stanley takes pride in delivering what it always has, the best in quality at a fair price. And anyone who's used the product will tell you, nothing comes close to a Stanley. And for listening to this podcast, Stanley is going to give you the best discount you'll find anywhere. All you need to do is head on over to stanley1913.com, go shopping, and when you check out, enter the code DRINKFAST. That's all one word, all lowercase at checkout, and you will get 30% off your entire order. If you spend over $75, I'll throw in a limited edition Powell Movement beanie. Those are my sponsors. Now let's get back into the podcast. I've never witnessed a best friend die. You had to do that at 14 years old while you've got all this stuff going on in your head. And he was the one friend that you probably could trust him with just about anything in your entire life. And he goes, when you're 14, how do you deal with that? I mean, not even thinking about the other shit you're dealing with, but how do you deal with the loss of your friend?
I honestly, I don't even really know. I think in a lot of ways I didn't, because it's manifested itself later in life and things that I have had to unpack in therapy and unprocessed trauma and grief and flashbacks and things that have sort of happened in different moments of my life, whether it was because of a breathwork meditation session or because of some hallucinogenic drug that I tried out or whatever it is. But I realized that I probably haven't dealt with a lot of it. And there is definitely some shit that I still have to work through, but I also have, granted I got very choked up because I don't talk about it very often. I have talked about it a little bit, and that is really cathartic and therapeutic. And I also, at this exact moment, I'm actually writing a book, or I'm trying to. It's fucking a lot of work.
Yeah.
But I am trying to sit down and write and churn out this book, and I've got a literary agent who's really wonderful and believes in me and the project, and writing some of this stuff has really been helpful. And I think that that's me starting to unpack some of this stuff.
that you've had bottled up your whole life.
17 years later.
It's so crazy. I mean, because you haven't been free until what, like 2015? So it's like your whole life's worth of stuff to unpack. So there's a whole lot going on to get you to be at a place where you're even. And, you know, it's going to be your life's work, I feel like, just dealing with a lot of the shit that you had to deal with that you couldn't even talk about when you were a kid. So at least we're in a space where you can feel comfortable talking about it. Given I don't think the world's totally better. There's still too many assholes out there. That's a different story. But you and Hoot were growing up. You guys are going to be pro skiers together. And he's not around anymore. And by the time you're 16, you are going to carry that forward and make that dream happen for the both of you. And that's when you get signed by Corrupt Skis. Now, they were an interesting brand in the ski world. They were like a startup that had a shit ton of money and a skier from Europe who was in charge of everything. And they just pretty much bought up the industry and had an all-time dream team. You being a kid who is on New Schoolers every day and is like the ultimate grom and knows every trick in every movie, you being on a team with Candide, was that just mind-blowing?
Yeah, it really was. I mean, I don't even know how else to say it. Like, Candide was someone that I looked up to so much as a kid, and honestly, actually someone that I look up to probably more now as an adult. I think he's just so inspiring, and the shit that he keeps doing and to put out there is just so beyond. And he's kind of like an anomaly. He's really like exists in his own sphere. But even like Justin Dory and TJ Schiller and Colby West, like those were guys that were really at the top of their game at that time. And like TJ was my all-time favorite skier ever. So like to be on the same team with him was crazy. But also I will say that Corrupt seemed to have a lot of money. And in fact, they did not. I think a lot of people didn't get paid.
Yeah, it seemed like everybody was getting rich until everybody stopped getting paid. And how did Corrupt end for you?
That's exactly how it ended for me. They came in, I think I signed like a 3-year contract, and like my first year they were paying me $10,000, which was a ton of money at the time for me, or I thought it was.
You're 16, yeah.
Yeah, but then I didn't get it.
Did they do anything for you? Did they send you around the world, or was it all stuff you were paying for out of pocket when you were trying to get reimbursed?
No, I wasn't paying for it out of pocket. They definitely did some stuff for me. They brought me to New Zealand for my first time to shoot the product, and it was my first time going to New Zealand. I got to do the New Zealand Open, and that was like one of my first open events that the pros compete in also. Because like before that I had done Aspen Open, but you don't usually have the top guys there.
Right.
But that kind of like marked the beginning of my career, I guess, on the circuit. And it was a slow burn. Like I'm in some ways like envious of the kids that like come out of nowhere and just fucking like win something. And like that is really badass. And I used to be like, frustrated with my kind of trajectory because it was certainly a lot slower. But at the same point, like I kind of actually appreciate that because I think that it's humbling and grounding. But yeah, I went from like just being in the events and like being there to like, oh, I made finals sometimes. And then like a couple random podiums, but then it would still be a bunch of like lower placing things. And then it would be like sort of more consistent podiums and some wins. And then it kind of became more consistent. I mean, at the end of my career, it's not like I was winning everything anymore, but there was a couple of seasons where I kind of was and felt like I was really, really on it and knew that if I landed my run, I was going to be on the podium or win. And I mean, that was definitely a cool feeling, but it was years of not having that on the pro circuit before it was that.
Yeah. And then speaking of the Corrupt years, you go from that nightmare situation there. I call it a nightmare because whenever you don't get paid, I like to think of that as a nightmare. But you go from that situation to maybe the coolest brand in skiing, especially at that point, Armada. So you go from being on a team with Candide to being on a team with Tanner, which is mind-blowing again. And when you see these guys and you meet up with Tanner and you meet up with Candide or anybody that you see, do you get starstruck at all at that point? Because you're pretty young.
Kind of. Not really. I don't know. I mean, some more so than others. Like, I was definitely starstruck meeting TJ, and like, I mean, I already said it, but like TJ was my favorite skier. And
yep.
like, I also was really obsessed with Yoon when I was younger, so I was like really excited to meet Yoon, and Simon and Tanner too, but I guess not quite on the same level.
Okay. Getting on Armada, did you do that yourself, or is this around the time that you hooked up with super agent Michael Spencer?
No, it was with Michael, yeah. Michael made that happen for me, and he wasn't there for the Corrupt of it all, but he got me out of my Corrupt contract, well, basically because they weren't paying me and they folded, but he pivoted me toward Armada, which was an interesting fit for me. I don't think it really was a fit. Obviously, now that they have their prestige and they are like the skiers company, and in industry, they're about as cool as it can get.
Right.
Yeah, I don't really think it was a fit for me.
No, maybe not the best fit for you, but it is one of those brands that all the core kids are like dying to get on because they did have the perceived so cool before they were bought by Salomon and Atomic, even though they're still cool, but they're all part of the same brand that you eventually became a part of, which is pretty funny. But I'll say that things really start breaking out for you, it seems like, after you hook up with Michael Spencer. And I'm not going to say Michael Spencer did that for you, but people know you from contests and to a smaller extent Rage at this point. But the 2010-2011 season, you live in Breck with Bobby Brown. He's the king of skiing at that point. Bobby is just on fire. And are you guys just machines with training and pushing each other? And at that point, is that what it takes for you to be the best, is just to ski with the best every day?
Well, I don't know. It's interesting. I don't think I was like training at that point. Like, I remember Wallace used to be like, we're not training. And he would like, around like the 2014 Olympics and in the lead up to it, like people would always be like, what's your training regimen? And like, I feel like I remember so specifically him just being like, we don't train. We're not jocks. We're skiers. And I actually felt that way too. Like I wasn't ever in the gym before that. I didn't think of it that way. Like I thought about it in terms of like repetition and like doing things on different jumps and in inclement weather. Like that was, I guess, the training, which it is training, but I didn't think of it as training really. And so I don't think like Bobby and I were machines. I just think we were like hungry. Like we really wanted it and cared about it. And I was excited to have like a best friend in the sport. And he certainly was that and still is that. He's my best friend from the sport and one of my very best friends in life. But like his career trajectory was insane. So I was super inspired by it and like felt lucky to get to witness it. There was like a little bit of jealousy for sure, but like I think in the ways where like I sincerely was so happy for him. I just really wanted it for myself. And so it was motivating. But like, I don't know, it wasn't like training. I feel like we were actually like dumb. We used to go up to the hill and do like first try Fridays, regardless of what day it was. And he'd be like, all right, first run through the park, like do a dub 10. And I'm like, oh, fuck. And it's like shitty weather and I haven't hit the jumps, and I would do it because I just like didn't want to be a wuss.
Right. And then at this point in life, I would think your self-confidence is got to be pretty high, like you're crushing it in the ski world. But is that enough for you to feel good about yourself? Or does the fact that you have to hide who you really are, does that impact your confidence? And does that impact how you're doing at these big events? Because when I look at the X Games for the first 5 years, you don't do particularly well. I mean, it's not like you're 20th every time, but you're not really doing well in the finals for the first 5 years. And is it a confidence thing? Or are you just in your head at these events?
I am, yeah. Actually, like also the last year of Hoot's life, not to like bring everything back to that, but in a way it kind of always does seem to come back to that. But the last year of his life, his mom took me and him to the X Games in Aspen to watch, and we had been like, oh, we're going to be here, like we're going to compete here. And it was the year that they ended up modifying the slopestyle course because of weather, and it was just a big air basically, and
yep.
TJ won. And I was a huge TJ fan, as I said, so it was pretty thrilling for me. But I was like, we're going to be here, we're going to be here. And then it was like, that was in January, and he got killed in March, so it wasn't really a whole lot longer after. And then the first year I got into X Games, when I was 19, his mom gave me some of his ashes to spread on the course. And I am not saying that that's why I've done shitty there, but I think like it held a very, I don't even want to say a special place. Of course it was a special place, but it held a really significant place in my heart and in my head. And I just used to crumble there. I don't really know what it was, but I feel like I was like someone that could like really get into it and stay focused and whatever. And like even as I would be at other events and I would have like won Dew Tour the week before, or like won the Unolson Invitational, or won WSI, or won a World Cup, or like whatever it was, Dumont Cup, like I had wins in literally every contest on the planet, and I still never got an X Games gold. Like it was just kind of a mind fuck for me. But that very first year I got invited, I qualified first.
Oh, wow.
And was the first place qualifier, last person to drop, fell all 3 runs. And I did an upright switch right 10 in qualifying. It was like kind of very, very, very early days for doing both way dubs.
Yep.
But qualified without a right dub. And then in the practice before the final, learned to switch right dub 10 and was going to like swap that for my switch right 10. And didn't mess it up once in practice. Like did it like 6 runs in a row or something, and then fell on that trick every run in the final, I think. It's kind of like a wisdom thing. Like looking back, it's frustrating because like I was going for the win, and I think that that's commendable to like really go for it, and like if you ain't first or last kind of mentality. But like actually I sort of don't agree with that, and like second is great, and so is third, and like hell, so's fourth actually sucks. No one likes fourth. But like I actually would have been so much happier just sticking with the switch right 10 with the tail and like yeah, maybe I wouldn't have won, but like I bet I probably would have finished on the podium or close to the podium, and that would have been better than last in finals. But that's like what continued to happen. And most of the times I did have wins in X Games was because I toned myself down. Like it wasn't the run that I did like the first triple on, and I like thought that I was gonna like win the X Games because I did the first triple. Because that run I kind of like went too hard and it was like a little bit loose. And had I actually scaled it down like I did the following year and played it a little safer and ended up getting second, that would have been a smarter move. But it's an experience thing.
Looking at it on paper, based on the timeline of everything, it seems like after you came out, you were much more comfortable at the X Games and you got silver in both slope and pipe. But before that, when you had secrets, and it might not have been you having secrets, but I'm just looking at it on paper, you didn't do so well until all that shit was off your shoulders, given you did well in other contests, so you can't just say it's things going on inside your head. But does that play into it as just like the double life that you're leading? Does that mess with your head as well? Or you not even think about that at X?
No, absolutely. I'm thinking about that. It really is that. It's like there's so much energy and time spent when you're in the closet, like maintaining that, trying to make sure that someone doesn't find out this, that, or the other. And so at the very, very least, it doesn't let you focus. So you're not really in the right headspace when you need to be because you're distracted thinking about other things and trying to compartmentalize and keep one thing out of mind so that you can focus on this thing at hand. But that takes energy and effort. And like once it's off your shoulders, you just can breathe. So for the first time, I felt like I had that freedom to not have to double think everything. And like my first contest coming back after I came out, I was coming off an injury. And so like that's actually like the start of me going to the gym was that I blew my knee in France at the end of the 2014-15 season. And I was like in the gym for, I don't even know, like 6 months. And I was going through the physical rehab, but also was kind of doing like a lot of mental rehab. And that was when I sort of like started to process me coming out and me accepting that I was gay. Because up until then, I had not told anyone. Like in the sport, I had only told Bobby. And then like that summer before it came out to the world, like I told my mom and my brothers, a couple friends I grew up with, but not a lot of people. When the article came out and essentially I came out, like that was my coming out to everybody. That was like, with the exception of like 5 people. But when I was doing all that rehab, I was doing this mental rehab, I was like, I'm going to come out. And then when I came out, it was like kind of such a big deal, like bigger than I thought it was going to be in terms of like the sort of impact that it had and also the opportunities that it opened press wise. And like, I was on like Conan and I was doing all these different interviews and stuff. And it was so weird to suddenly be like talking so much about something that I had literally tried to not talk about for my entire life. And I also remember being like, shit, it's going to be so embarrassing if I tank next season. Like, if I just did all this press and now there's all these people watching and there's all this like additional exposure and visibility, and then I like drop the ball and ski horrible and don't get any podiums, it's just going to be awful. And my first contest back, I'd only been back on snow for like a week, and it was Dew Tour, and I won. And I was just like, oh yeah, no, this is it. It was just like, there was a mental thing. I was like, oh yeah, no, I'm here. It's good. I'm here. And I think it did just change. It was like nothing changed with my training. Like I literally hadn't been skiing. I'd been off snow for so long. The only thing I really feel like I had on my shoulders was just this extra pressure of additional eyeballs. But like, it was so freeing and so liberating that it just changed my headspace. And I didn't miss a podium that year. Like I won Dew Tour, went to X Games, got second in pipe and slope, went to Grand Prix and Mammoth and won the air and style, won the European Open, got 2 medals at X Games Oslo and big air and pipe. I mean, it's pretty crazy. It was a crazy season for me.
Now it's time for my second round of sponsors, and I'm going to start out with Peter Glenn Ski and Sports. Peter Glenn has been getting people out on the mountain for over 70 years, and they are known for their best-in-class service, both in-store and online. Peter Glenn isn't a giant retailer trying to take over the industry. They're the same mom-and-pop shop that has cared about you and your family having the best experience on the hill as possible. The staff knows what they are talking about, and they offer free shipping on orders over $50. They will match any reputable dealer's price online or in-store, and the return policy is easy, because the last thing Peter Glenn wants to do is make your shopping experience a hassle. So the next time you're buying gear, please check out the retailer that supports this podcast and the history of these sports by heading on over to peterglenn.com. My final sponsor is the 10 Barrel Brewery out of Bend, Oregon. Since 2006, 10 Barrel has been brewing the country's best beers, and they don't stop with just beer. Between their cocktails in a can that feature real hard A and they pack a punch, their clean line seltzers, which I've been drinking a ton lately, and their Profuse Juice IPA and Pilsner, which are my go-tos when it comes to their beers, I can't get enough 10 Barrel. And I know they have some flavors that you're going to love as well. You just need to try one. So next time you're at the store, please pick up a 6-pack of 10 Barrel and support the beer that supports more in ski, snowboard, and bike than anyone else out there. To find out more about the beer, the athletes, the events, and all things 10 Barrel, head on over to 10barrel.com. Those are my sponsors. Now let's jump back into the podcast. I'm going to step back in the closet for a couple more questions and then we'll get out of there. One thing I need to know is when nobody knows anything and you haven't told anybody but Bobby, are you sneaking off to gay bars and meeting people online, or is that too risky for your brand at that point and you just have to put off any kind of social and sexual life period until you're done skiing? Is that the thought process at that point?
Yeah, it was just put off. I didn't go to a gay bar till after I was out. Didn't have any sneaky hookups till after I was out. I actually was seeing a guy, someone that kind of worked in the industry, who was also deeply in the closet, and so he was the only guy I had ever kissed, ever fooled around with, and he was more often than not at some of the same shit that I was, because he was doing some stuff for TTR and for the snowboard tour, and we would just kind of end up in the same place, and so then that kind of got to happen, but it was we didn't even speak about it, and it went on for years like that. I mean, it was super not healthy. And sometimes something would happen with him, or we'd be in an argument, or I'd be fucking frustrated, and I couldn't bitch to Bobby or anyone the way that they would bitch about their girlfriend if something was going on, because I couldn't tell anyone. So everything just got bottled up and internalized, and it was tough. But no, I wasn't going to gay bars. I wasn't sneaking around. I mean, I was living a double life in a sense, but with just this one person. And if anything, actually, that relationship went on for 4+ years in the closet, and I think that it was not right. It wasn't we were so good for each other. It was we were not right for each other. It would have never worked, but I felt sort of trapped in it, and I think he did too, because no one else knew. And so it was this is my only lifeline to this part of myself that I want to be in touch with, but I'm too scared to be in touch with, kind of thing. But I was still sleeping with girls. I was having sex with girls after contests and at parties and stuff.
Every interview I read with you, or any interview I saw you on TV, you would talk about your girlfriend first and foremost, and then talk about something else, or talk about your buddies being wingmen, or talk about all the hot blondes at Yoon's event. And it's very easy for me to look back and be oh, he was covering it up. Now you can look back in every single one of those interviews when I was doing my research, and it's man, it's sad to just see you have to do that, knowing that you couldn't be yourself. It's so nice that you were able to do it. But at this point in life, when it's 2013, and we know the Olympics are going to be in Russia, and you're going to make the Olympic team, there's no way that you can tell people then, because they don't like gay people in Russia, and who knows what's going to happen to you. I mean, there was the band, I think they were called Pussy Riot or something like that were all arrested and put in jail for wearing a rainbow flag or something like that. And they don't like gay people in Russia, so you have to keep that under wraps there. Could you feel that in Russia, where there was just a not welcoming community at all?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, that was amongst other things, kind of a catalyst for me to want to come out, because I actually had a moment where I was I'm going to come out in Russia. Not that it happened this way, but I kind of had this lofty dream of what if I did the best run I could ever do and win the Olympics or win an Olympic medal and come down to the bottom and kiss this dude that I've been seeing.
That'd be amazing.
That's my coming out to the world in this hostile environment with these anti-LGBT legislatures in place and with the world watching. And I wanted to do that. And I think ultimately a couple things happened. One, I just wasn't brave enough to do that. But also I feel that would have forever tied me to this person that I was sort of seeing. And as I had said, I knew it wasn't really right. I just was stuck with him out of fear, kind of thing. And I felt that would sort of forever tie me to him. And I was already trying to cut ties a little bit.
But it would have been such a great story.
Totally. Well, should have done it, but didn't do it.
Well, you had to win first, too.
Yeah.
Another thing with that Russian Olympics that I didn't bring up is that you qualified for slopestyle and halfpipe. They had verbally told you that you were on the halfpipe team, and then they pulled that away from you from a coach's discretionary bid, which I get that they have them. But how the hell does someone tell you that you have an Olympic spot and then pull it out from under you? And does that make you bitter?
Yeah, it definitely does. I have not gotten over it. I mean, I have in that I've accepted it and I've made peace with it, but it was really frustrating. I feel like I killed myself trying to make the Olympics for pipe and slope in 2014 and 2018. And I don't think people understand how much work it is. I mean, Eileen just fucking made it look like a piece of cake. But for the most part, it's really hard. And you're getting less training than everybody at the actual contests because you have to jump back and forth. And then if everyone else gets a day off or a morning off, you don't, because that's the qualifying thing. For the other ones, you're kind of just your body's run ragged and there's no recovery time. And I made both and I hit the objective criteria for both. And it's the requirement was 2 podiums per discipline. And I had got both the podiums and I was told I was going and I was so excited. And then, it got taken and it was really a bummer. And then Michael Spencer, he said, I love Michael. He's been my manager my whole career. But he was see, it worked out though, because you got the medal in slope and it was good that you just had to focus on that. But I'm kind of well, how the fuck do you know that I wouldn't have gotten a medal in pipe too? And if anything, that was momentum and that would have made pipe have kind of a no strings attached, no pressure feeling to it because I had already gotten a medal. And at the test event in Sochi the year before the Sochi Olympics, I got second in the pipe. And so I had already sort of performed in that exact place and shown that. And then the following season after the 2014 Olympics was when I did the kind of crazy run in Park City and won that World Cup and was the first one to do 4 doubles in a pipe.
Yep.
That was the kind of run that I was working toward in 2014. So it is frustrating. Part of me wonders what if. I mean, maybe I would have gotten a medal. Maybe I would have done well. Maybe I wouldn't have. But it feels not fair that I didn't get the chance to do it after hitting the criteria and being told I had it.
Yeah, I would be very, very disappointed, upset, angry. I mean, the words would just keep flowing out of my mouth. I'd be so pissed because you put so much into it. But you did get a medal, and I guess that's a saving grace, but it doesn't really make up for not being in the halfpipe. But when you think about the gold medal, or when you think about the gold medal, you didn't get the gold medal. Sorry about that. When you think about medals, you got the silver medal. Joss gets the gold medal. Nick Gepper gets the bronze. And when you look at you three, it's an American sweep on the podium. But you're the one who's got the gift of gab, I feel more than those two. Joss is an awesome dude, but he's not the most talkative dude in the world. And Gepper's great too, but he's not the best in front of a camera. So you not only have the puppy thing going on, which is going to make you bigger than your Olympic medal is going to make you, but you have an Olympic medal. So does it almost feel like you've overshadowed the other medalists on the U.S. when you got the silver?
Certainly not then. I mean, I think I've gone on to do bigger things and sort of transcend the sport in a way maybe that either of them haven't, but I don't really feel like that. If anything, I feel a little badly for Joss because I feel everyone after they win the Olympics gets their press tour and their moment, and he won the Olympics, and I was honestly so stoked for him. My post after the Olympics, my first one was just dedicated to him because he's one of my best friends and he had just lost his dad and he barely made the team, and then he went in and won, and I don't know, I kind of just couldn't think of a better person for something like that to happen to. I mean, he's the guy. He's the best. I just love Joss. And I sort of felt bad that because it was a sweep and because there'd only been 2 U.S. sweeps in Olympic history that they really packaged us together. And they're oh, there's these 3 young, cute guys. And this is the inaugural ski slopestyle event. And they're all American. And they're whatever. And so then we were this little package of teen heartthrobs or whatever. And I guess I kind of feel bad for Joss. I think that benefited ultimately probably Nick more than anyone, but also certainly me. And if anything, it probably took away from Joss a little bit.
Is that the first time you really, truly feel famous in life?
Yeah, probably. I still don't feel famous, to be honest. I mean, not really famous.
You're more famous than you were as a skier, I will say that.
Yeah, I know, for sure. But also skiing's so small.
For sure. It's a tiny little bubble, and you're Ski Town famous for many, many years, but now you're more famous than Ski Town famous. And does that change the life for you now that you're an Olympic medalist? I'm talking about back then. Or is it a month of heavy press and then it's back to being a skier again and everybody forgets about it?
It was a month of heavy press, but it was honestly, that press was a really hard time for me. It was a low point because dealing with the closet stuff, as I said, I had kind of gotten to a point where I was almost sort of ready. I mean, as you can see, because I came out the next year, but with all that anti-LGBT legislature in place, I had been thinking that I wanted to come out. I had been considering it. So I was sort of already there. And then to go on this press tour where literally every interview is what's your type of girl? What's your dream date? Who's your celebrity crush? All that stuff that I wasn't really asked about much before. And suddenly now I was saying it in some VH1 interview or in a Rolling Stone interview and on this huge thing. And I felt I was lying more than I had been lying before. And I wasn't like lying by omission. I was just like lying. And so I kind of hated myself. And like, I think everyone should enjoy that press tour. And I was really not enjoying it.
Is this the kind of thing where you come back to the hotel room, you stand in front of the mirror and you're like crying and just looking at yourself like, who the fuck am I?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I definitely had a lot of moments like brushing my teeth in the hotel mirror, looking at myself like, what are you doing? Who are you? This is so embarrassing.
So you get through Sochi, you get home, and I know that you eventually share things with Michael Spencer. I think you did that before when you shared with other people what was going on with you. And when do you make the decision when you get home to come out? Because it's not one of those easy decisions, I'm sure. I know it's been brewing and you're ready to do it. But when do you actually make the decision and you put a team together and you're like, hey, we need to formulate a plan of how to do this? Because I would think that this should be a calculated thing as you've been thinking about it every day pretty much your whole life.
Yeah. Well, actually, Michael, I had actually told Michael a long time before. Michael had known for years before the Olympics, and kind of not even necessarily by choice, but one of the brands that he had put me on or gotten me on was Empire, which is Simon Dumont's company, and I was skiing for them and I was doing well. And that was at this sort of same time that I had started hanging out with this dude that worked on the snowboard tour, Robin. And I don't know, we kind of became just like fast friends. Like, he's really funny, and it just like, that was what it was. Like, we were fast friends long before we ever like hooked up or anything, because I didn't know he was gay and I certainly wasn't advertising it.
Right.
But it happened, and I think like a couple people kind of cued in on it. Not that we were hooking up, but just that like we were suddenly fast friends, which I think for most straight guys, it's not super common to like suddenly become really, really close friends with someone, like be inseparable from them. I mean, of course it can happen, but people teased me for it. One of those people being Simon, and I was at World Ski Invitational in Whistler, and I was at the top of the jump for Big Air finals. I was like just getting off the snowmobile to get to the top, and Simon actually like yelled to me from the top of the drop in with like everyone around. He's like, "You're late." And I was like, I know, I'm coming. And then like before I could finish, sorry, there's about to be swearing, you can beep it later. But I was like coming up the stairs and I was like, I know, I'm coming. He's like, what, were you sucking your boyfriend's dick, you like screamed it. And like everyone at the top started laughing. And like, I've never actually felt worse about myself than in that moment.
Huh.
Literally, it was like one of the specific moments where I just wanted to disappear. But I like took off my gloves at the top and was like, here, you can have your gloves. I'm not going to ski for your company.
Wow.
And then he was like, oh, what if I'm joking? And I was like, I don't care. And then basically Michael was like, well, you signed a contract so you can't get out of it. And I was like, bro, get me out of it. And we were like in his car in Park City like a month later. And he's like, I don't know if I can get you out of it. And like, meanwhile, Simon's one of Michael's clients too. And I was like, you have to get me out of it. And he's like, why? Like, what happened? What am I not knowing? And so I like told him the whole situation, told him the story I just told you. And he was like, okay. He's like, well, it's like boys will be boys. Like, it's locker room talk. And I like was like almost in tears and was like, well, it's not boys will be boys. Like, it's fucking worse than that. And like, whatever. And he was like, is part of the reason that this is like hurting so much, that this is like so hard for you because it's like, there's a sliver of truth there. Or, like, he's like touching on something. And I like just broke into tears and was like, yeah, I'm gay. And like, I was not ready to tell anyone. It was like years before I told anyone else. But he handled it amazing. I mean, he was like, okay, well, I didn't realize that. He's like, your secret is safe with me. I won't tell anyone, and I will keep that secret, and I'll get you out of your contract. And if you decide that you want to tell people down the line, I'll be here to hold your hand. And if you need a shoulder to cry on in the meantime, I'm here. And like, just like couldn't have said all the better things, all the right things. But he got me out of the contract. I stopped skiing for them. And Michael held that secret for a long time. So, I mean, Michael was my confidant. And Michael is who I told when I was ready to come out, which was after the Olympics. But it was like a little bit of processing. I mean, I had that knee injury, and that's what I was saying. Like, I did the Olympics, and some people like don't keep competing. And like, I used to just love competing. So like, then I went to like the SFR tour in France, and I went to 3 more events after the Olympics. And the very last one of the years where I blew my knee. And so then when I was like home in Denver, that was kind of like when I pulled the thread and it all came unraveled. And that was like when I was really like had a moment to myself, because I had been just going for so long, like more so than other skiers even. Like, I feel like people will do a handful of events in a year, and like I used to do everything. Like I would literally be like, if there was a contest, I was like, okay, what's the next one? Like I would go to some random AFP event just to like continue to get points and prize money, and like I just liked winning and I liked competing, and like I think I was just running for myself ultimately.
I mean, I feel like it's therapy when you're skiing. Everything else disappears. You don't have to think about any of the bullshit going on in your life or you're going to get hurt. So it's like, I would think anytime you're skiing, you can forget about all your problems.
Totally. And I think that is it. But I think I was like truly just kind of running from myself all the time. And it was that, like, I knew that when I was skiing, I wasn't thinking about something else. And so I was just trying to ski all the time so that I could never think about something else. And then I got to that point where I was recovering from an injury and I was sort of just forced to sit still. And I think I was like, oh yeah, I think I want to do this. And I actually, the decision wasn't that I was like, I'm going to come out and then continue competing. The decision that I had made was that I was going to quit skiing so that I could come out, because I just didn't think that they could happen at the same time.
But there's something so special about you being on top of your game and coming out at the same time. It's like kind of like we were saying before, where if you were to win the Olympics and then go down and kiss your boyfriend, it'd be like, boom, I'm here. Well, there's something to be said for coming out and then still being better than everybody. It's just like, look, I haven't changed at all. I'm still the badass I've always been, and here I am, me today.
Well, thanks. But actually, when I did tell Michael I was going to quit, yeah, I kind of had that breakdown, and he was like, you can do both at the same time. Like, you can still do that. Because it was like a full season after competing. Oh, God, sorry. I've gotten my timeline all sorts of fucked up. Sorry. After the Olympics, I did keep competing. I did not get hurt. It was the following season that I did get hurt. And that following season was when I had decided I was going to come out, but also when I was thinking I was going to quit. Sorry, I skewed that a little bit. I was getting two seasons mixed up. But it was at X Games of 2015 that I had told Michael, like, dude, I'm done. I had gotten the medal at Olympics, and I still, for whatever reason, couldn't put it down at X Games. I fell again, and I was just so frustrated. And I was also like, I just want to be myself. Like, I just want to come out. I want to have a boyfriend. Like, I want to go to gay bars. I don't want to stay in the closet. Like, I'm going to quit because I just can't take it anymore. And I feel like I've done enough in the sport. I've gotten an Olympic medal. I had a bronze medal at X Games at the time, but I was like, I've gotten an X Games medal. I've gotten an Olympic medal. I've won everything else. Like, I don't care. I just want to be done. And then he was like, well, you could just do both. Like, you can literally come out and keep skiing. Will you just, for me, keep competing this season? And at the end of the year, if you want to quit, that's fine. If at the end of the year you want to come out, that's fine. But just keep skiing for just this season, and can we reevaluate this conversation in the spring? That was the year following the Olympics, and that was the year that I got hurt at the very last event of the year. But I had kind of decided that I was going to do that. I was like, all right, I'm coming out at the end of this year, and I was like, you know what? I want to come out as the number one ranked guy. That was sort of important to me, because I was like, I feel like no one can talk shit on your ranking. If you're number one, like, what are they going to say? You're
Exactly.
fucking number one. That was kind of my mindset. And then I went from X Games, where I did poorly, and it was coming off of the heels of Dew Tour that I did poorly at that year after winning it the previous year. And I don't know, something changed. Like, I kind of made that decision that I was going to come out, and then like went from X Games to, that was actually the year of Aaron Style, and like won Aaron Style, won the Mammoth Grand Prix, went to the Grand Prix World Cup in Park City, where I did that run with the four doubles and won that. And like, basically over the course of the next few events, like climbed up to the number one ranked guy and was like, cool, I'm going to do this. And then at that very last event of the year, I blew my knee, and I was so frustrated because I was leading the World Cup circuit for points for pipe. And it was like, whoever does better between me and David Wise gets the Crystal Globe. And it was the SFR Tour in France. And I qualified first and he qualified second. And I was like feeling so good. And I was doing that same run from Park City, and I had just done it in warm-ups. And then I got back to the top of the pipe, and they're like, practice is about to close. If you want one more, you can take one more. And I was like, I'm dropping last. I guess I should take it just to like keep my legs warm. And I had just done my run with four doubles. And then I went through the pipe again, just doing a singles run, and popped too hard on an alley flat five, landed at the bottom and blew my knee. And then I had to like sit there and like watch someone else win the Crystal Globe. And like, it was so gutting. But anyway, sorry. So then that's when I started thinking about it. And I had already sort of made the decision that I was going to come out, but then I was like stuck at home, sitting with my feelings, rehabbing my knee. And that's when I like was like, okay, I'm going to do it. And that's when I started telling a few people. That's when I told my mom. That's when I told my brothers.
And you come up with the plan of attack, per se, of how you're going to let people know. You have the article written. It's going to be on the cover of ESPN, the magazine. So you're going to get a shit ton of press for it. But what I'm thinking about is when you're getting ready to write that tweet that's going to go out to the world and you're going to tell them, Is your heart just pounding out of your chest as you're doing it? Or are you smiling with like nervous energy? Or what are you thinking when you're getting ready to tell the biggest secret you've ever had in your entire life that you probably told yourself many times you were never going to tell anyone, that you're ready to tell the world and you know everyone's going to see it the second you press tweet? What's going through your head then?
It was definitely nervous energy. I mean, like, I didn't sleep the night before because I knew the article and like the interview on ESPN was coming out the following morning. So it was like Christmas morning. Like when you're a kid and you can't sleep on Christmas Eve. Like I couldn't sleep. My mind was churning. I was so like excited and scared and nervous and everything. And then, yeah, when I sent that tweet, it like was immediately a huge relief. Like it was so freeing, so liberating, just kind of like, all right, it's done. Everyone knows. And I had really gotten myself to a place mentally where I was like, all right, if everybody turns their back on me, I don't care. Because the people that I've told now are like my mom, my brothers, Bobby, like Michael knew, a couple of friends knew that I had told recently, and they'd all responded like so well and so kindly. And I felt so loved by them, and it like strengthened those relationships that I kind of was like, I don't care. It's like literally if nobody else is happy with this news or like whatever, then I've got everything I need. I really don't care. And then it was just the exact opposite reaction. I got so much support. And so it was like really, really, really special and freeing. And yeah.
So you get a ton of support, I'm sure, from all the people you know, too. Do you lose anybody from your inner circle that really had beliefs that were not in line with yours, and you figure that out after you make the announcement?
Not really. I feel like there's some people that I like maybe was closer with beforehand and then became not, and I don't know if that has something to do with it, but not really. Most of the people that were in my life really were supportive. And the morning I came out, I got a call from Simon. Literally, like, I don't know if Michael put him up to it, but it was really sweet, and it stands out to me as like one of the nicest moments of that whole day, which was like the most sort of like self-love day I've ever had. And it was him calling me to apologize for what he had said and how it might have hurt me and that he didn't realize. And if he had actually realized, he never would have said that. And it was really sweet. And I feel like it took a big man to do that in that way. And it meant a lot. So.
Well, I'm glad he did that. At this point, I would keep going because there's so much more to talk about. But, we've given each other a hard stop in about 10 minutes. And I have something in my podcast that I like to call Inappropriate Questions. What it is I get someone that you know to ask 3 questions, and they can be anything. For this version of Inappropriate Questions, I got 2 different people. I'm going to start with the guy who made you a lot of money in skiing, super agent to the stars, Michael Spencer. Michael has 2 questions for you that I'm going to queue up right now, and you can hear the first one from Michael once I get it going on my phone.
So Gus, you and I have been through thick and thin for many things. What is one of the one times where you absolutely were so angry with me that you didn't want to talk to me for weeks on end?
I'm like, how much longer do we have? No, it's actually funny. Nothing's coming to mind immediately. I can't think of a specific moment.
You mentioned the half pipe thing where he was like, hey, at least you got the silver in slope. That kind of frustrated you, it sounded like.
Yeah, I mean, I never really knew if Michael played into that whole thing with Olympics and like the coach's discretion spot at all. But like, I know he's very good at staying connected with everybody, like whether it's the people at the US team or whatever. And the person that ended up taking my spot was Torin Yater-Wallace. I actually love Torin. Like, I think he's like a really good guy. And I also think he would have probably earned that spot had he been healthy, but he was dealing with some crazy injuries and he wasn't able to do the qualifying events, and he had done really well the year before, and so they gave him the spot. And like, it makes sense to me, I guess. Like it does. I mean, I can understand that, and I certainly don't hold it against Torin at all. I think it was more just the way it all happened. Like, they literally told me I had the spot, and then they took that away, and like didn't really ever apologize for that. And it definitely left a bad taste in my mouth with the US team, which is like part of the reason that I was like pretty willing to switch to the British team. But I also never knew if Michael like was really like advocating for Torin, because Torin was one of his athletes. But again, like, I don't know. I think, as I said, I think Torin would have gotten that spot anyway. So like, had he been healthy, maybe I wouldn't even have ever had the spot to begin with, because I would have just ended up being the 5th ranked guy. But yeah, I definitely was pretty annoyed that Michael was like, well, you got silver, like it's all good, it all worked out. And I was kind of like, what the fuck? But I mean, in a way, he also was right. Like, it did all work out, and that wasn't how it was supposed to be, and everything kind of happens as it's supposed to, and you deal with it the way it happens.
All right, we will go with his second inappropriate question.
Okay. Also, that wasn't even inappropriate.
I know. It used to be a lot more inappropriate stuff, and people have changed their ways with like how people have gotten PC. But what can I do? Let's go with question number 2.
In 2015, when you came out, you were trying to get a hold of Miley Cyrus. What was her response once she finally got back to you right when you came out?
So, yeah, when I was doing all those interviews around Olympics or whatever, and they were like, who's your dream girl? Who's your celebrity crush? And I was like, oh, fuck, what do I do here? I said Miley, and like the other guys said other female celebrities. Like, I don't know if it was Nick or Joss, but one of them said Emma Watson, and one of them said Taylor Swift, and like NBC or People Magazine or whoever it was, like, sent out that tweet saying, like, these are who our, like, heartthrob Olympians are crushing on this Valentine's Day or whatever, like, so stupid and cheesy. But, like, Miley responded to me, and then, like, we ended up hanging out, and, like, I don't know, like, I went to her show, I brought Bobby and his girlfriend, I don't know. Miley and I, like, kind of had, like, a little moment, sort of. And then when I was coming out, which wasn't that long after that, I was like, oof, I kind of like want to tell her, like, give her a heads up, because we had sort of just had this like moment, and I don't want her to be like, what the fuck? And so I was like trying to text her and being like, hey, I'm in LA right now, are you around? And then she like didn't respond. And then I like texted again. I was like, hey, I just kind of like want to talk to you about something. And she didn't respond. And then I was like, okay, cool. Well, I'm not going to be like the crazy person that just keeps texting and texting. So I just like let it go. And then the day that I came out and it like went public, she posted the picture, the magazine cover, on her Instagram and was like, I'm so proud of this guy. Wow. And then she like texted me this like really sweet text. And I was like, oh my God, I was trying to get a hold of you. I didn't want this to like be a blindside. I don't know why it felt important to me to tell you. And she's like, oh my God, I'm sorry. I was ignoring your calls because I thought you were trying to like hook up, and I got back together with my boyfriend.
Funny. All right, we are going to go into another set of inappropriate questions. It's actually just one more question, but Michael's going to say something to you first. Then we're going to jump into the final inappropriate question. I would spoil who it is, but I'm not going to. I'm just going to play it through, and then you can answer afterwards. So here's Michael's thoughtful message to you, and then the last inappropriate question.
Finally, Gus, the one thing I want to say is that you've taught me more about how to be true to myself. And going through this process with you and seeing the change and the impact you've had on so many lives, I couldn't be more proud to call you a friend.
Oh, God, Michael, that was sweet.
Gus, Digi Dave, the second most popular queer in skiing. My inappropriate question for you is, what was the most awkward thing you did to hide your sexuality before coming out?
I mean, I guess sleeping with girls, or like more specifically, not even to be so vulgar, but like going down on girls. Like I would literally be there and I'd be like, in my mind, like, girl, what are you doing? Not girl meaning her, girl meaning me. I'd be like, what are you doing? But I just was trying so hard to be like, no, I can do this. See, I'm straight. And I just like so obviously wasn't.
All right. Well, Gus, that is Inappropriate Questions, and that's our podcast. And when I think of your career, you were the last true throwback. I mean, slopestyle pipe, big air. You film with MSP. I think you film with Poor Boys. You did all the shit that everybody used to do that not everybody does anymore. You're the last like Iron Man who does that kind of stuff. And then on top of that, you are arguably the most important skier of our time. And if not just skier, you're the most important person in skiing of our time for sure. You've made a big difference in just the way that people look at people and the way that people treat people. And while the world is still full of a lot of assholes, people like yourself who are brave, that can put themselves out there for the benefit of others, because there's a little kid out there who's going to be stoked that you did what you did because he's got a mentor and a hero right now. And I want to thank you for your time, thank you for your bravery, and thank you for everything.
Oh my God, that was really sweet. Thank you so much for the kind words, and thank you for having me. And honestly, also thank you for like, I feel like the way you've done your research and also just the way you handled that all was nice. I was admittedly a little nervous, and you made me feel right at ease. So thank you for that.
So that was time with Gus Kenworthy, and I've called him the most important skier of our time, and I really believe that. I mean, you can look at all his contest results and see that he was an absolute badass in everything the dude did. But really, the most important thing the dude did was stay at the highest level in the game and come out. and let people know who he really was. So it's amazing that a person like Gus, who has everything in the world going for them, didn't feel comfortable letting his secret out. It's not even amazing. It's predictable. I mean, who wants to tell that secret in the early 2000s when people are using the word gay as an adjective and it's completely wrong? And while I want to go on and tell you how great Gus is, I'm really in the complete wrong headspace right now when I'm recording this outro. I am not going to get into the details of why this is the worst week I've had in almost my entire life, and I feel like everything is falling apart, but I have landed at that point in life, and while I'm happy and healthy, I can't say that all mine are, and unfortunately, life throws you curveballs here and there, and while I may explain my curveball later on, I will tell you that it's been a taxing and draining week for me. And while I was so excited to put out this 300th episode and talk so many great things about Gus in this outro, I'm just happy that I'm holding it together and I'm not crying. But I guess there's nothing wrong with crying, and I guess everybody goes through shit in their life. I just happen to be going through it right now. So if you have positive vibes, send them my family's way. And for all of you who have shit going on in your life, I'll send my positive vibes your way. I know I'm kind of babbling and not making sense here, but you know what? That's the headspace I'm in right now. And episode 300 is a wrap. And the final thing I need to do is, first and foremost, is thank every one of you for listening. Like I said in the intro, without you guys, there is no podcast. So I appreciate the hell out of every single one of you that listens, that tells a friend about the show, that posts about it. It really does mean a lot to me, and thank you for doing that. I also need to thank the amazing brands who make this thing happen. They are Stanley, Peter Glenn Ski and Sports, Elon Skis, the 10 Barrel Brewery, and Outdoor Research. That was episode 300. Have a great week, everyone.